Hey, what's going on, guys? So earlier this year, Marvel and DC started playing nice with one another for the first time in over 20 years, with a two-part crossover between Batman and Deadpool, the first issue, published by Marvel, being Deadpool Batman, with the second, published by DC, Batman Deadpool. And when I did my review for the first crossover, Deadpool Batman, like I said in that video, I appreciated it for what it was. You know, Zeb Wells was writing it, and he's one of the main writers on the Deadpool Wolverine movie. Greg Capullo was the artist, which is a no-brainer. He's the biggest Batman artist of the current century so far. And you kind of just knew what this book was going to be going into it, which is to say, it was a lot of fun. Not particularly deep, but it was fun. It was basically just Deadpool Wolverine, but replace Wolverine with Batman and the Void with Gotham City, and that's it. That's really all it was, and that's kind of all it needed to be, honestly. And really, it was an artist showcase for Greg Capullo. Meanwhile, the backups were where the real meat and potatoes were at. Those were the stories that, in my opinion, really carried the crossover for the most part, and laid the potential for what future Marvel and DC crossovers could yield. But then DC published their crossover, Batman Deadpool, and look, no disrespect to Marvel, but
your entrance was good, his was better.
So the creative team behind DC's second half of the crossover, Batman Deadpool, is Grant Morrison and Dan Mora for the main story. And first of all, of course it was going to be Dan Mora who's going to be the artist on this. That man is like current year Jim Lee over at DC. He does everything, and he's the guy that DC's trying to model their house style after. Meanwhile, Grant Morrison was the real surprise for me. Dude's been semi-retired from comics for like 6 or 7 years at this point, but they still got it. And this was just one of those perfect one-and-done single-issue stories, especially if you're a Morrison. And this was just one of those perfect one-and-done single-issue stories, especially if you're a Morrison meat writer like I am. The A story is literally just Morrison playing their greatest hits while also having a lot of fun referencing some of the previous Marvel DC crossovers. And it's a very simple plot. Cassandra Nova tricks Batman into finding the location of the Cosmic Typewriter, which is in possession of Grant Morrison, who writes themselves into the story like they did with Animal Man. In fact, there's quite a few Animal Man references here. Not that I've actually read Animal Man. I want to, I just haven't gotten to it yet. But I feel like I know a lot about it already from interacting with people online and from when I worked at my local comic shop. That was a book that people talked about all the time. So I feel like I know a lot about it just by osmosis, but I digress. Anyway, the crossover isn't a sequel to the previous Deadpool Batman crossover, although Deadpool does reference fighting alongside Batman, or a version of Batman before. So it's up to interpretation as to whether or not this is the same Deadpool or if he's just breaking the fourth wall. And I gotta say, Morrison has a really good voice for Deadpool. I knew Batman was going to be in good hands because Morrison as a writer is to Batman what Greg Capullo is to Batman as an artist. So I knew that going in. But I really like the way Deadpool is written here. He's a chatterbox, but he's not annoying in like a mid-2000s glory hole, 2 girls, 1 cup Reddit kind of way. Like, no, he's actually funny, and he bounces off of Batman really well. One of my favorite running jokes is how Batman keeps referring to Deadpool as Deathstroke. In fact, there's a whole confrontation where they first meet up where Bruce thinks that Wade is a version of Deathstroke, and then when Wade corrects him, he's like, "Oh, what a relief, I thought you were actually going to be a problem."
Emotional, damn it!
And like I said, Cassandra Nova was the big villain here because she's a Grant Morrison creation, so of course she was. But also, I don't know. It's interesting because she was the villain of the Deadpool Wolverine movie, and apparently, according to Morrison, that was their big inspiration for this crossover, which is just the most terribly ironic thing because that's what I was expecting from the last crossover, because that was being written by the dude who actually wrote the Deadpool Wolverine movie. But here, Morrison is just straight up riffing that movie, down to Deadpool teaming up with a no-nonsense superhero, navigating an ethereal plane of existence while Cassandra Nova's looking for a cosmic doodad. Like, it kind of just is Deadpool Wolverine in a way that Zeb Wells was, kind of intentionally avoiding making that first crossover, but arguably works a lot better here because Morrison and Mora are playing more to the strengths of the medium itself rather than relying on the iconography of these two characters and the novelty of watching their dynamic at play. And it's a celebration of Marvel and DC respectively, as well as their previous crossovers, and you even see that with the lore explanation for why the Marvel and DC universes are crossing over in the first place. Eternity and Kismet bump into each other at a bar for cosmic gods and entities, and they end up having a one-night stand, which in itself isn't that weird. I mean, that's basically the premise behind JLA Avengers, but having the narrative mirror Eternity's stroke game and actually showing him wearing Kismet's ankles like a pair of earrings made me audibly gasp while reading this at my local Starbucks. I'm not gonna lie, that was just the most out-of-pocket thing I think I've seen in a Marvel and DC comic the past couple years. But yeah, like I said, this was just a lot of fun, but not in like a corporate slop, enjoy it for what it is kind of way. Like, no, I just legitimately enjoyed it. Now, as for the backups, they were about 50-50 for me. I really liked the Doctor Strange Constantine crossover. First and foremost, Hayden Sherman is without a doubt one of the best working artists in comics today, and I've praised him for this a lot when talking about Absolute Wonder Woman, but his paneling is marvelous. And there's a part where John steals, or at least tries to steal, the Eye of Agamotto, and he sees Ghost Rider fighting Swamp Thing and Mephisto fighting Neron, which was a lot of fun because I don't think I've seen Neron in anything for the past couple of years, so it was nice seeing him actually being used in something. But yeah, this was just another one of those backups, like the Guardians of the Galaxy Green Lantern backup from the first Deadpool Batman crossover, that I kind of just wish was its own thing, because I feel like this could just be a fun crossover on its own. I also like the Wolverine Nightwing crossover, and I'm not usually the world's biggest Tom Taylor guy, but I like him in small doses, and this was pleasant. You have X-23 and Dick Grayson talking about how they're both legacies to arguably the biggest heroes between Marvel and DC respectively, and how similar their lives are to one another in weird ways. And I'm just a sucker for Bruno Renando's art. I'll read literally anything that man draws. He's another one of those artists who's just bringing the heat no matter what he's on. But then you have the other two crossovers, and I mean, Harley Quinn and the Hulk? I don't even get the theme there. Like, Harley and Typhoid Mary? Yeah. Hulk and Solomon Grundy, or Hulk and Blockbuster, sure, but Hulk and Harley Quinn? And they're fighting radioactive hot dogs? What the fuck are we doing here? And then there's Static and Miss Marvel, and this one actually kind of hurt, because I like Static a lot, and I also like Miss Marvel, and I think there's a lot of potential with each of these characters crossing over because they're so similar to one another. They're both teen superheroes who don't have tragic origin stories. They're just superhero fans who got the chance to be superheroes themselves. They both got their powers after being exposed to weird superhero gas because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they both have that thing where, they're in a complicated romantic place with their best friend. I don't know. I feel like you could do so much between these two. But instead, they fight over who gets to add who to whose group chat. Because that's how the youngins get low with their funky lingo flow. But yeah, 5 stories in total. 3 out of the 5 are good. 2 out of the 5 are, really good. Now, this issue is $9. I got the Sean Gordon Murphy variant, which I think is $1 extra. But still, $8 for a comic book is a huge ask. I was also expecting the Jeremy Adams Flash Fantastic Four crossover to be here, but I guess that just didn't make the print, which sucks because I was really excited to see that one. But yeah, like I said, I had fun with the book as is, and I hope we get more crossovers like this in the future. Maybe one that actually focuses on the stories that some of these backups are on, because Doctor Strange and Constantine, that's a story. Static and Miss Marvel, that's potentially a story. But yeah, pretty good overall, in my opinion. A little better than the first crossover, if you ask me. But I think the backups were definitely stronger in Deadpool Batman. But what about you? What do you think? Let me know down below in the comment section. And as always, until next time, happy reading and take care. Peace.